Paul Aloysius Hines was born in Virginia, about 15 miles from Washington, D.C., on March 1, 1855. In 1872, Hines began his professional baseball career at the age of 17 with the National Association's Washington Nationals. He batted .224 with 11 hits in 11 games. In 1873, with the Washington Blue Legs in 39 games, he batted .331 with an OPS plus of 123. In 1874, Hines would play for the Chicago White Stockings, batting .295 with 80 hits in 59 games with an OPS plus of 109. In 1875, Hines would record 101 hits, batting .328 in 64 games with an OPS plus of 149. The following season, he again played in 64 games and repeated his 101-hit performance from the year before, only slightly increasing his average to .331, leading the league with 21 doubles and recording an OPS plus of 146. With a record of 52-14 in 1876, the White Stockings became the first champions of the National League. Hines would play his final season with Chicago in 1877, and in 60 games he recorded 73 hits, resulting in a .280 batting average, which saw his OPS plus fall to 97. Following the 1877 season, Hines would play for the Providence Grays starting in 1878 and would remain a fixture for the next 7 seasons. In 1878, Hines would play 62 games and become an offensive powerhouse, achieving the first ever batting Triple Crown, although this was not recognized until years later, hitting .358 with 4 home runs, 50 RBI, as well as leading the league in total bases with 125 and achieving an OPS plus of 177. Hines, on May 8, 1878, would be involved in what may be considered the first ever unassisted triple play. In a home game at Messer Street grounds, playing against Boston, with Ezra Sutton on third and Jack Manning on second, there were no outs, and Jack Burdick was at the plate. Hines took off towards left field to catch a shallow fly off the bat of Burdick and made the catch. He then ran all the way to third base to retire Manning. What is contested is whether Sutton had rounded third base. At the time, the rules stated that if both players had rounded third base, the runners would be out if the fielder had caught a fly ball, then proceeded to step on third base. Second baseman Charles Sweezy stated that he had assisted Hines when Sutton had allegedly reached third base and attempted to retreat to second base as Sweezy received the throw from Hines. Tim Murnane, the first baseman and later a Boston Globe reporter, stated on multiple occasions that the play was unassisted and entirely completed by Hines. Sutton later stated that he was 20 feet away from third base at the time Hines caught the shallow fly ball. The Hines unassisted triple play has remained a hotly contested subject. MLB historian John Thorne believes that the play was unassisted, but MLB does not recognize it, and unfortunately the game's scorecard did not survive. In an interview with a reporter from the Pittsburgh Press in 1913, Hines would recall the moment in his own words. "It was made May 8, 1878. I was playing a deep center field and there were runners on second and third when a short fly was hit over the second base. I ran in after the ball, believing I had the speed to reach it, for I was pretty fast in those days. Both base runners thought the ball would fall safe and ran for the plate. I got the ball off my instep near second, touched the base, and then ran to third, reaching that base before the runner who had occupied it could return, thus completing the play. The play has been questioned, but I see that umpire Charles F. Daniels, who worked that day, vouched for it recently." After he completed the play, Hines recounted, "Of course, I remember distinctly how the crowd, when it realized what had happened, went wild. It was one of the proudest moments in the life of Paul Hines, I tell you." It is of interest to note that in the same 1913 interview, Hines remarked that, "We did everything 30 years ago they do today, with the possible exception of sacrificing. Little of that was done, and I consider the game was better." He would remark that Charlie Buffington, Tim Keefe, and Old Hoss Radbourne were the greatest pitchers he ever saw. He also stated that Ned Williamson was the greatest player he ever witnessed, and that Silver Flint was the most banged up and best catcher that ever lived. In 1879, Hines continued his offensive onslaught, leading the league in hits with 146, batting average .357, total bases 197, as well as at-bats and plate appearances, while again achieving an OPS plus of 177. Hines would record another MLB first when facing the Troy Trojans as he went 6 for 6 on August 26, 1879, becoming the first player in an extra innings game to collect 6 hits. Hines would continue to play well offensively in 1880, leading the league in plate appearances with 387 in 85 games and batting .307 with 115 hits. In 1881, Hines would lead the league in doubles, but only bat .285 while collecting 103 hits. The following season in 1882, he would bounce back, collecting 117 hits in 84 games and batting .309. In Hines' last 3 seasons with the Providence Grays, he batted .299, .302, and .270, while leading the league in doubles with 36 in 1884. He would help the Grays win the World Series that year, going 2 for 8 with 2 stolen bases, 3 walks, and 1 RBI. The Grays would fold following the 1885 season, in which Hines would bat .270 with an OPS plus of 113. Hines would return to Washington in 1886 and play for the Nationals for the next 2 seasons. Hines would go on to steal 21 bases that season while batting .312 in 121 games and recording a career-high 157 hits and an OPS plus of 157. His power numbers continued to grow with 9 home runs and 30 doubles that season while collecting 56 RBIs and a career-high 225 total bases. It's unclear the timing of this unfortunate accident, but at some point during the 1886 season, Hines was struck by a pitch thrown by grasshopper Jim Whitney and rendered deaf, causing him to use an ear trumpet that would also double as a walking cane thereafter. Hines would bat .308 in 1887, playing 123 games while tying a career high in RBIs with 72, hitting a career best 10 home runs, recording 147 hits, and an OPS plus of 136. He would set a personal best with 46 stolen bases that season. At this point in his career, he had primarily played in the outfield and recorded less than ideal fielding percentages, but what stands out was his ability to field first base in his limited playing time at the position over the years. Hines would sign with the Indianapolis Hoosiers for the 1888 season. That year, he played in a career-high 133 games while earning a .281 batting average. He also collected 144 hits, 26 doubles, and 58 RBIs with an OPS of 125. In his final season with Indianapolis in 1889, he collected his final season of over 300 batting average with a .305 mark that included 148 hits, 27 doubles, 6 home runs, tied a career high in RBIs with 72, and an OPS plus of 115. This campaign saw him finally get his first and only season as a full-time first baseman, achieving a .964 fielding percentage. In 1890, Hines played for the Pittsburgh Alleghenies as well as the Boston Beaneaters. He was 35 years old, and age had began to catch up with him, batting only .239 in 100 games and seeing his OPS plus dip to 80. A career achievement for Hines occurred that season when he recorded his 2,000th hit. 1891 proved to be Hines' final season in the major leagues when he returned to where it all began in Washington with the Nationals. He had a strong season that year, batting .282 over 54 games with an OPS plus of 117. Hines would continue his career in the minor leagues, where he would conclude his baseball career while splitting time between Alabama, Burlington, Iowa, and Mobile during the 1896 season at the age of 41. Late in life, Hines' legacy would be marred by an arrest for pickpocketing on November 15, 1922, when he was 67. In a sting at 9th and New York Avenue Northwest in Washington, Hines stole the pocketbook of a female police officer. The authorities had been surveilling Hines for a long period of time, the Washington Evening Star reported. Following his arrest, his home at 233 Rhode Island Avenue was searched by police, and in it they found a number of purses and pocketbooks, as well as 25 pairs of eyeglasses and spectacles. Up until this arrest, Hines had had a sterling reputation and was known to many in the area, and some in the department were quick to blame the incident on his advancing years. "I have played my game and lost," Hines broke down and told the arresting officers. A $1,000 bond was posted, and Hines was released, but after that the trail goes cold. While the arrest may have become history, the incident had lasting damage to Hines' reputation in the baseball world. His accomplishments were never questioned prior to this incident, with such anecdotes as, "A cleaner, more upright player never set foot on the bag." But sadly, they were undoubtedly questioned after leading many to think that this incident is what affected his chances at getting into Cooperstown. Hines was destitute and placed in a Maryland nursing home in 1926, and having been deaf and blind for many years at that point, died on July 10, 1935, at age 80 in Hyattsville, Maryland. His final resting place is at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Washington, D.C. Fortunately for Hines, the story doesn't end there. In Hines' 1935 obituary, it is mentioned but not confirmed that President William McKinley became friends with Hines in the 1870s and would give Hines the position of Department of Agriculture postmaster. What we can confirm is that on the morning of May 24, 1897, he is in the old Columbia Law Building at 5th and D Streets Northwest. A man named Leonidas Scoofy, a self-described gentleman of leisure, and his sister-in-law, Miss Willie Lonsdale, entered that same old Columbia Law Building that day and were escorted into prominent lawyer Howe Totten's private office. Scoofy locked the door behind him and began to assault Totten, at which point he revealed a revolver and threatened to shoot the lawyer. Anyone within earshot could hear the screams of Totten, and many of his clerks rushed to the scene. A deaf Hines did not hear the screams, but did see the commotion, and assisted the clerks in breaking down the locked door of the private room. The Washington Times reported that Mr. Hines leaped about Scoofy and with one blow wrenched the pistol away and knocked him to one side of the room. Hines was described as the former baseball player in the press. The incident is believed to have been due to some involvement between Scoofy's wife and Mr. Totten and was ultimately dropped in November of 1897. Scoofy's wife would divorce him soon after and go on to become an actress, while he later became a lumber baron around Mendocino. Unfortunately for Hines, this act of heroism would come long before his arrest for pickpocketing, and we can assume it went largely unnoticed outside of Washington at the time. Paul Aloysius Hines was a prolific hitter in the early days of baseball and overcame adversity to achieve many baseball firsts, whether they were either never recognized unassisted triple play or recognized years later batting Triple Crown. He would go on to amass 2,133 hits, 399 doubles, bat .302 lifetime, and have a career OPS plus of 132. A man who would accept a challenge to catch a baseball drop from the top of the Washington Monument, who would wear tight-fitting shirts that were said to bring a blush to the face of many a fair maid, who would have a heroic confrontation, and finally a sad end. Hines' life is a mix of heroism and sadness, but no one can doubt that it was full. Paul Hines is larger than life, and his achievements on the field undoubtable, and he is well deserving of a spot in Cooperstown.